Thanks for listening to Wine for Normal People, the podcast for people who like wine, but not the snobbery that goes with it. I'm Elizabeth Schneider, a certified sommelier and certified specialist of wine.
And I'm MC Ice, just a wine-loving normal person.
Before we get started, I am so excited because I have on my desk in front of me Wine for Normal People, the book that I wrote. I've spent a long time writing this book, and I am so proud of it, and I'm so excited that it will be available to you. It will be in your hands in early November. It's in my hands right now. I'm going to record the audiobook soon. If you want this book to be a super success, you can do me one big favor by pre-ordering. If you do that, it shows the publishers that there's lots of interest. It makes bookstores more excited about holding promotional events that are possibly near you. And it also helps us make a bestseller list, which would be huge for a first-time author like myself. So if you can pre-order it on any of the independent bookseller sites, on Chapters, on Indigo, on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, please help us out at Wine for Normal People by Elizabeth Schneider. And we are going to get to the podcast. Just wanted to remind you that during this episode, we are going to give you an offer from Corvin.com. You're going to enter normal at checkout to get an awesome discount. Corvin's the first and only tool in the world that lets you pour wine without removing the cork. Listen in the middle of the show to find out how you can save on this awesome device that we all should have. Now let's get to Theresa Breuer, one of my favorite people in wine. This is a crazy, awesome interview. I feel both guilty and overjoyed to have our guest on today, who is likely one of the coolest people I've met in the wine industry, full stop. Theresa Breuer, who I spent an entire afternoon with in Rheingau, which is an area in Germany. We're going to talk all about it. Nobody is better on educating about this area than Theresa, who grew up here. Her family has Georg Breuer. How'd I do on the German?
Perfect.
Nice. I learned from you. So this is a part of her ancestry. It's 130 years, beginning in 1880. Theresa is young and represents the face of New Germany. She is so smart, has such a great understanding of what goes on. I adore you, Theresa. You know that. Like if you and I lived near each other, I would bother you all the time. I would just hang out with you nonstop. You'd never get rid of me. But it's a family operation. Theresa took it over when she was quite young. She still is quite young, and her sister is involved. There's a bunch of other people involved, but she has so much great information to share. If you are not in love with the Rheingau region right now, after this podcast, you will be. You can't not feel the infectious enthusiasm that Theresa brings when she talks about it. So welcome, Theresa, to the show.
Well, thank you. There's absolutely no pressure on me now.
You and I have hung out together. You know that I do. I adore you. I think you're fantastic. You got to tell us about your history, your family's history in wine, because there's some business stuff, there's some grower stuff, and then just tell us the whole Breuer family story, please.
Yeah, well, if we look back to those like 130 years, actually a bit more, since the origin of the company was founded in 1880. It was not always our family. At the beginning, it was actually like two guys that started to deal with wines to start a négociant business, and my great grandfather was helping them out, or was employed as a manager because he was really good with figures and just into wine, but he was not a winemaker. Then the Second World War kind of changed dramatically life in Rüdesheim, not just because it was in general, I guess, and I imagine, a very dramatic period, but Rüdesheim was heavily bomb attacked or destroyed by a bomb attack, and 80% of the village was actually destroyed. And we were extremely lucky by keeping our buildings in really good condition. And my grandfather then started to change the focus of not trading with wines, really focusing about where he is and what is around us, and obviously that a vineyard.
Was there a lot of vineyard land available after the war for him to look at, because I bet people left and there was stuff was probably not in great condition from the land perspective either.
That's, true. But people were left or probably didn't return back home, or the winery was destroyed. They had no place anymore to work with the grapes that they had out in the fields. So the vineyards themselves, they were actually not too bad condition. There were also some war prisoners from France here in our area that were very, very well educated in treating vineyards.
Oh, wow.
So the condition of the vineyards of the land was not too bad. There was most of the families that had their wineries in the middle of the village were actually lacking their production place because of that bomb attack. So we, with our quite big cellars, due to that previous main business we did, had the capacity to take over more land and vineyards and grapes. And that was kind of the turning point. And then my grandfather really started to become a grape grower and winemaker, what was not really the main part of our business before. And he was, I think, very well talented and probably smart enough to do like the best out of it, and started then really to work as a winery. So Georg, the name of our winery, is actually my grandfather's name, even though my great-grandfather was the one starting working with wine, but Georg was the one starting making wine.
Right.
In a more serious way.
Where did he learn how to make wine? Was it just from everybody else around him, or he just...
Yeah. I think
so
this is kind of like... Yeah, it's kind of like a natural thing when you're like... Rüdesheim is surrounded by vineyards. Rheingau is tiny. There's nothing more than water, vineyards, and forest. So if you're grow up in the middle of Rüdesheim, you have no chance to ignore that. No, and he was working with wines, so of course there was always a general interest of wines, and I think it was a lot of learning by doing. And when he started, the focus was not on probably producing like the world's best wines, but every vintage brings a learning effect. And if you have an ambition behind it, you of course like gather experience with every year and just try to change things, make them better, adjust things. And I think that is something that kind of happened in our family all the time, that everybody really wanted to kind of like step up from what was done before.
But your father seemed to have a little bit of a fire in his belly, right? From what you've said and from what I've read, I mean, he was kind of upset that Rheingau, after the war, was making a lot of bulk wine. There's still, please talk about this because you and I discussed this when we met, that there's still people just making bad bulk Rheingau wine, and they're sort of resting on their reputation, but it's not high quality. But your father was like, no, we're not going to do this, because Rheingau's history is not, I don't think most people are aware of how Burgundian it is. It's so much like Burgundy. And your dad got pretty upset about this and wanted to improve it, right?
Yeah, well, generally speaking today, well, there's not really a lot of bad wine, but Rheingau is a region that is really small, and that is actually, we should not even produce okay wine, because it is really a privileged place by terroir and by the smallness that we have. Actually, everybody should really have the ambition to produce really good wines. So I think the focus was just very, very different in the years after war, and also the reputation of Rheingau wines worldwide was always kind of like settled also on a sweeter style of wines, because that in a high quality way is also possible to grow here. But people became a little bit like lazy and started to relax a little bit too much on that reputation, and stepping down from producing high quality sweet wines to very simple sweet wines, which were a little bit not a little bit, they were lacking identity. So you could not really like figure out of those wines that there is something about Rheingau that it's worth it to be shared with the world. And on the other hand, Rheingau wines were always expensive because of the small size and the hard working conditions we have in our region. So having expensive wines, or compared to other region, more expensive wines and not like an outstanding quality, doesn't really help building a long-term good image on something. So yeah, my father kind of...
The Breuer family has always been business-oriented as well as wine-oriented. So I'm sure that
we were partly part of that. It was there were also periods where there was more of like a basic wine running through our cellars, but it was not our own wines. That was wine that we bought in and bought in as bulk wines and bottled it. So that was also part of our history.
You didn't make that wine.
But we were trading that wine because it was easy to make money that way.
Right.
But that was a totally different period. And luckily, my father realized early enough that if you, on a long run, want to be successful and build up an identification of a local winery, you have really to build a profile around quality and uniqueness. And he was very, very, very sure that the fine dry wines, especially Riesling, that you can produce in our area are something that Rheingau really can be unique for and stepping up with. And that's why he very strictly stopped doing all this négociant part and tried really to focus on the best possible sites and the highest possible quality and wines, and especially dry wines. And that was something he was very early with, and he was really sure that he could do a revolution on Rheingau Riesling worldwide, kind of. And he was fighting for that.
But he really did. And I think the other thing about it is that he is known. When I was traveling throughout the Rheingau, people have enormous respect for your family because, Schloss Johannesburg sort of stayed with it. They have always made their style, and that has helped enormously because even though it's sort of its own thing, that helps. But your family recognized something and championed it and maybe made some people angry because they were not always, because they weren't always, people don't want to hear the truth a lot. But your father was very adamant about it. Did you always want to be in wine? You didn't want to go to Frankfurt. I mean, Frankfurt's 45 minutes away, so you could have just gone and been a business person, but you didn't want to do that.
No, it wasn't really a question. Or yes and no. It was, I was always feeling very at home. So I always felt connected to our village and the landscape and everything. My sister was the opposite. She left home when she was 10 years old because she wanted to go to a ballet boarding school, and she became really a big city person, which I enjoy by visiting big cities, but I really always realize how home I am when I come back to Rheingau. And I think if you have such a feeling inside yourself, you realize what a great chance you have to do by continuing something that your ancestors has already started. This is something you can easily get happy with. And also getting to the chance to work in the wine industry is something which is, I think, really fulfilling. It's one of the few industries or agriculture segments where you have a chance to really work all the way through with a product from planting a vineyard to seeing people enjoying a wine, and everything is involved. Traveling is involved. We sell our wines worldwide. We have so many guests here that we can show our home and the beauty of where we are. It's in some segments it's a pure craft, and you come home with dirty hands and you've kind of in your body what you've been doing all day long. And at the end it's about a cultural product and about sharing history, and this is something that is very, very satisfying. So
I love that. I love what you just said. I feel like we need to bottle that, and that is exactly there are some ugly parts of the wine industry, but you are in the best part of it, in the sense that you live in this beautiful place and you're making the wine that needs to be made from the area, and you're just so passionate. This is why I love you. This is exactly it. So just we're going to not dwell on this, but very quickly, your father passed away very young and suddenly, and you took over. You were still in Geisenheim, right? You were still in university, and you were
I haven't even started when he passed away.
So how did you decide that you still went to university? Yeah.
So I was 20 when my father passed away, and I was more or less just finishing school and did. I was thinking, or my original plan was to become a winemaker, but not really straight after school, because I had a feeling if I do it now, I will never do anything else. And when my father passed away, he was 57 and not ill or anything at all. So it wasn't really visible that, he would not be around soon. So I thought that I have plenty of time and could do something else maybe. But when that happened and he passed away, I just realized that the winery is the place where I want to be, and it just felt very right to just be there. And I felt very close to my father as well, kind of like continuing. I was definitely not continuing because I had no clue what to do.
You probably had more clue than you thought, though, right?
Yeah, no, but of course at the beginning you start with, or I started with the like super kind of like boring stuff and just going through whatever is lying on that desk, or just sorting things, or trying to understand what that corner in the office tries to tell you. So it's really it was really a very naive way of getting into it. And my mom was the one who kind of made me study in Geisenheim, because she wanted me to do the like proper German way, and having an education finished, and not whatever was like no need of a title, but she really wanted me to go through something. And that was very smart, because it really showed me what the wine industry is about, and it connected me with a lot of people. And Geisenheim is 3.5 kilometers away from us, so it was very, very easy to combine with the daily life in our winery. So I had a chance to kind of gather all the theoretic information that Geisenheim offered, and I selected, I think, also in a good way what is really important for my daily work, and what is maybe something I can focus not too much about, and probably get more experience in the practical way at home.
I'm sure you made contacts and friends also who probably are helpful now. And I bet your mom was probably thinking, if you had decided not to go to Geisenheim, which if you're listening to this and you don't know what the heck Geisenheim is, it is basically one of the best wine universities in the world. It has amazing training in every discipline that has to do with wine. All of the real top winemakers in Germany wind up going to Geisenheim. And I think that by going there, you wound up probably learning things from other people. You probably still have friends at other wineries now, right? From families around. And that helps too.
Yeah, no, it's a great network that you can build there. And I didn't regret at all to go there. It was really a really good time. And it was also next to like the bit more serious life in the winery. It really gave you a feeling of just being a student for a couple of hours a day, which is really, really great. And I had such fantastic people around me in the winery that allowed me to do that. And they were really super, super helpful and really pushing me in getting that done. And
the winery could run while you went to school, which is definitely. And we're a kid, basically. I mean, still a kid at that point. All right. I want you to talk about Rheingau. You're one of the best ambassadors for Rheingau that I have met. Because you're passionate and you're not trying to spin anything, which I think is very helpful. Talk about why Rheingau is so unique. And I want everybody to know I will be posting companion videos and pictures that you'll be able to see. I really encourage you to look at them, because this is a place that if you have not seen pictures of it or you haven't been there, it is really something very special. So can you talk about the Taunus Forest and give the spiel?
Yes. Well, Rheingau is the unique and beautiful part of Rheingau is that it is really a small region, and within that smallness, it offers just a huge diversity in many ways. The whole spread of Rheingau is not more than 30 kilometers along the Rhine River, but we are at a very special part of the Rhine River, because if you have a map of Germany in mind, the river runs more or less from the south, leaving Bodensee up to the north, ending up in the North Sea. But kind of in the middle of it, it takes two curves, and these two curves make the river run not from the south to the north. It actually runs then from east to west. And that, changed obviously the exposure of the vineyard. So we're south-facing with all our vineyards in the area. Some of them are more southeast orientated. In Rüdesheim, where we're privileged by only having south-facing parts. And then the last bits and pieces of Rheingau are southwest orientated. And those two curves that the river takes are, of course, landscape influenced, because we have the Taunus Mountains in our back. Taunus is not really, not a high mountain at all, but it's rock-wise a mountain that contains of quartzite, which is obviously a very hard material, and the river couldn't go through. So that's why I take that curve. And then when the soil content changed from quartzite to slate, which is a lot around in the northern part of the Rhine Valley, then that's a softer rock and the river could go up north again. So we have this rock combination of slate and quartzite in the more western parts of the region. And then we have in the north, well, more eastern and northern parts of the wine regions, we have quartzite from that Taunus rocks. And also that rocks that mountain in our back holds the bad weather from the north away. So we are really privileged in climate in our area. And that soil combination of slate and quartzite is also very like dramatic kind of, because it's like a black and white mixture that really bring a lot of influence to the wines and the flavor of the grapes that we're having there.
Could not be better for Riesling. It's basically Rheingau. What I think about Rheingau, I think that obviously Dionysus or Bacchus just took the river and changed it, because it's basically the perfect place for wine growing, especially because Rheingau is at 50 degrees latitude.
Yeah.
In the past, this was a huge problem because sometimes you couldn't ripen grapes, and now the climate has changed. And a lot of people have been asking me if you could just tell us quickly this year, we're recording this in 2019, little bit odd, right?
Yeah, well, it's another special year, I would say. We had a very hot last year, and it was very dry last year as well. And everybody was quite sure this has been an extreme and probably the most extreme condition we will ever have. But no, then you get a surprise by a new year. And this year has been even hotter. We had like 3 crazy heat waves with temperatures that were going up to 40 degrees Celsius, which is really, really a lot for us in summer. Yeah. And beside that, what is actually the heavier struggle for the vines is that it has been super dry. The bit higher temperatures are, as you said, actually not too bad, and they bring a very nice ripeness. But to really inhale heat and bring a positive effect to the grapes, you need to have water to have a very, very lively plant in front of you. But we had a super dry winter after a very dry last year summer, and not a lot of rainfall at all this year. And having slate soils, which are very, very poor in character and not able to really keep any water, that really makes the especially the vines in the steep slopes that we have a lot around as well really struggle. So you can see that they really reduce their activity. The canopy is pretty small, and there is like an okay amount of grapes. And we're very lucky that we have a little bit of cooler temperatures and a little bit of rain also forecasted for August now. So we really hope that the grape will ripen. But to be honest, in the most extreme sites, we're not sure. So we will see how the vines are able to handle those conditions.
I was telling someone that it seems so dramatic in the middle of the summer. And yeah, you're probably going to have to take off some grapes for sunburn. But the real vital thing is at the beginning with flowering to make sure, and fruit set to make sure that there's no frost and stuff that goes on. And then at the end, when the grapes are ripe and fully formed, is there enough rain? Is there enough, but not too much, and all of that kind of stuff? So it's really that tail end that's going to matter most, right?
Absolutely true. And it's always when people ask me about a forecast, I am very, very shy with my answers because everything can still happen. And last year surprised us a lot because even though it was so dry and it stayed dry until the very end, the vines were producing quite a lot of grapes, and they were very juicy and with high extracts and a little bit lower acidity, which is also okay for us because we have a general very high acidity.
Right.
So at the end, the wines were developing in a very beautiful way and were totally surprising myself. So I was not expecting that much, but the vintage shows beautiful. So I am always a friend of like judging in the latest possible moment. The best moment actually is when the wine is in the bottle.
Well, what about a year after the wine's in the bottle? That's probably, I hate the whole futures thing. I think is so absurd because you watch people say, and your wines especially, which we'll talk about. But all right, I want to get back to the sites because we're going to build up to this. But I alluded to this before, but most people don't know that Rheingau has classifications. And that is something that can be confusing, but can you break that down? Because you have your Grand Cru sites, basically, your Premier Cru, or it follows the Burgundian model. There's there's 4 levels.
Absolutely. Rheingau has a long background in classifying sites, and there had always, not always, but already since 150, more than 100 years, there was a bit of like mapping and showing of the really privileged sites. And
the monks were here,
this is something that
it's the same.
Sorry?
The Cistercian monks were here also. We're in Rheingau also.
Yes.
So these are the same monks that did the work in Burgundy. They also did it in Rheingau. So I don't think Rheingau does itself justice by Burgundy gets all of that credit, but Rheingau is exactly the same.
True. No, there's a lot that we have in common, and I think with those like bit more northern regions, it's actually also a bit easier to work on classification because it's very obvious where there are great spots and not. And this is something that today's classification kind of builds on today as well. In our case, we have a very, very classic system of 4 quality levels that we bring our Rieslings into, from the basic level that shows the widest origin, which means the region, up to like a village wine, and then a wine that gathers all our steep slopes, and at the end in the top segment, the single vineyard wine, which in our case are 100% steep slopes that are classified kind of the longest ever in our area.
Why is Riesling the grape so Rheingau grows, the percentage is isn't it about 80%? I mean, that's more than even Mosel. I think people think Mosel, Mosel is all Riesling, but that's not the case. Rheingau has more Riesling than any other area in Germany. Why is that? It's just because it's so small and so concentrated? And the grape does so well?
Of course, it's we have the highest percentage of Riesling in our area, but if you relate it in size to other regions that are much bigger, of course, we are not the biggest Riesling producers, but in percentage we are. Yeah. So the region is definitely defined by its Riesling, and that on a worldwide scale. And it just works really, really well. We are in the north, if you see the wine world, and Riesling is a variety that is really able to work with colder temperatures during winter as well. So this is probably one of the main reasons that in the old days, when it was really cold in winter and frost was something regular in winter, Riesling was a variety that just could do that very well. And Riesling develops beautifully, or needs to have also cold temperatures to build the full flavor structure that we have in our wines. So having a big difference of day and night temperature, what happens especially in the last part of the ripening season, is something that just brings the full beauty to Riesling. And that works in our region, as it does at the Mosel region as well. It's Nordic regions connected to rivers that really bring that intensity into the wines. And the combination of the soil structure we have with that climate is something that just works great for Riesling.
We are going to take a step away from the podcast. And while we do that, I want to thank all the patrons on Patreon. It is our private site, which has private conversations, some videos, you get extra goodies, extra hangouts, things like that, conversations you won't get anywhere else. I'm spending more and more time on Patreon as more of you join. For just $1 or $2 or $5 a month, you get some really great interaction, but more than that, you help us keep the podcast going. Independent producers like myself, I'm not part of a network. This is it. So without your support, it's very hard for us to keep going, but we have had so much help from you guys, and we just so appreciate it. If you're interested in contributing to the community and becoming a Wine for Normal People member, so to speak, go to patreon.com/wine for normal people and check it out today. patreon.com/wine for normal people. And also helping us keep the podcast alive are 2 sponsors this week. First, Coravin.com. As I told you at the beginning, Coravin is the first and only tool in the world that lets you pour your wine without removing the cork. You can pour wine in any amount. You'll preserve what's left over in the bottle for weeks, months, or years. It is awesome. For my classes, I've been using it, and that way I have these bottles that I can pour a glass of, but then I have them for later on in the week or later on the next week. 62% of wine drinkers forgo drinking a glass of wine after work or with dinner because they don't want to open a new bottle. This way, you don't have to. You can have a glass of wine whenever you're in the mood, and you can have a glass of whatever you want. You don't have to have whatever anybody else is having. You can have what you want. It's really a lot of drinking freedom. Coravin, for a limited time, is making this offer. You visit Coravin.com, you enter normal at checkout, you get $20 off your purchase of $50 or more. If you already have a Coravin, this is great for the refillable argon cartridges, or if you don't have one, this is a really special deal. So $20 off your purchase of $50 or more, Coravin, Coravin.com, enter normal at checkout. Also, Last Bottle Wines. Man, Last Bottle is so awesome. Look, not only did they do us the favor of tasting a lot of terrible wines so we don't have to do it, it is an approachable and fun way to discover the very best wines at the lowest prices you're going to see. The prices range from $10 to $100, and the quality is fantastic. Don't get into wine clubs. Do Last Bottle Wines. What it is one email a day, one offer a day. So you're not going to be inundated in your email box by millions and millions of bottles and millions of authors that you can't process. This is a fantastic opportunity for you to learn a little bit about wine and to order just the things you like as they come up. They're highly rated wines. You're going to go to lastbottlewines.com/normal. You'll join to get a $10 instant credit to use towards your first offer. And you want to do it this week, because this week is marathon week. And that means that bottles that are really amazing that maybe you've seen in the past or new bottles are coming up, and you will have 2 full days of a little bit more than one offer a day, but at prices you will never see again. So go to lastbottlewines.com/normal and get in on this before the marathon days. Now let's get back to Theresa Breuer and this amazing podcast. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I enjoyed recording it.
But it's warmed up considerably now, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have the frost risk you used to have. Is that correct?
No, that's true. So there are also other varieties can grow here, but Riesling does still very, very, very good. But these bit warmer conditions, especially also during winter that we have, just allow other varieties to be also, to have them in good quality as well. But we still have all the positive aspects that help Riesling developing in a nice way. Yeah.
One of the things that I think that we also talked about when I was there. So when I started drinking, I am a Riesling fanatic. I love it. And one of the things that really struck me as so wrong that people say about Rheingau, especially Rheingau versus Mosel, which are really the 2 premier regions of German Riesling, is that people used to say, well, Rheingau is much bolder than Mosel, and it's the big-shouldered brother to Mosel. And I could not find that to be less true. I think that Rheingau is more delicate and shy in its youth and then develops all of these really complex flavors. And part of the reason people love Mosel is because it's very upfront. And it is what it is. It doesn't mean it doesn't age beautifully, but it's got a ton of fruit and a ton of floral aromatics. Rheingau backs off. It's a bit shyer. Is that a good classification or no of that?
No, definitely. It brings it to a point. And at the Mosel Valley, well, Mosel is big. It's also you really find diverse styles on the Mosel Valley. But in general, you have a little bit higher and probably taste-wise also a little bit more pointed acidity, which actually needs a little bit more fruitiness to be covered, especially in a younger stage. And to be honest, not many people are patient enough to wait for their wines until they reach their natural balance and beauty. So
they also don't taste great. The dry wines from Mosel are really tough to handle because of that acidity.
Yeah,
it's too much.
Yeah, well, you need time, and this is something that people, especially probably in the last 30 years, don't really give to white wine anymore. And there's still this rumor in mind that a white wine should be enjoyed in a very young and fresh stage, which, yes, of course, is something that you can do. But as many people say that Pinot is not really a red grape, it is more something in between. Riesling is also not the classic white wine. With that high acidity, it can bring out beautiful wines in a very crisp and lively young stage, but it also brings a substance to the wine that you can age the wines forever, more or less. And then they need that high acidity to be lively and beautiful after so many years. But adapting to the today's demand with a high acidity that they have even more at the Mosel region than we have, you need to have this more pronounced fruitiness to kind of cover the sharp acidity a little bit. So yes, the wines are on the fruit side. Yes,
a lot of them just cover up all the acidity with sugar. The worst producers do.
So this is definitely a different style, which obviously it brings more like a bit of a lemonade effect to the wine, which you don't find so much in Rheingau because there is not such a need of it because of the bit more moderate acidity levels.
Another thing that blew my mind when I came to Rheingau, I assumed that everything was going to be in stainless steel. But you use, they're called Stückfass, is that right? The big barrels?
Yes, yeah, that's the local size.
Yes.
Yeah.
So these huge oak barrels, but they're not oak barrels in the way that we think of oak when we're thinking about Bordeaux or Burgundy. How do you use oak?
Yeah. Well, we use oak in a very traditional way. Half of our cellar is represented in oak, and we use German oak barrels, and the size is actually called Stück. That was right. So it's 1,200 liter in an egg-shaped round barrel. And we also use them in double and half size, but 1,200 liters is yeah. Well, if you go to the Pfalz region, you find way bigger barrels. So we think it's quite a very nice to handle size. But it's the main difference is that the oak is untreated. When you're going when you have a French oak barrel in mind, the small tiny ones with just 225 liters as content, they are treated in a very different way. Those barrique barrels are burned from the inside to add kind of a more intense flavor of the barrel to the wine. And in our case, we don't actually want any influence by the oak flavor itself. So we're using oak for wines to actually micro-oxygen process in barrel and not really to take over any of the oak flavor. So there's no treatment happening with the barrels. There's no toasting. They're not burned from the inside. It's only the pure oak. And due to the non-treated way of having them, we're not losing anything with years. If you have these French small barrels, after a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years, you don't really taste anything of that toasted effect anymore. So the barrels are more or less useless if you want to get that effect out of. In our case, because we're not waiting for any effect on the oak primarily taste-wise, we can use them endless. So
it's more environmentally friendly.
Yes, it is, yes.
Yep.
And it's we use the barrels forever. So there's still barrels in our cellar that my grandfather bought. We constantly buy some new ones just to make sure that there will not be a point where we only have very young oak in our cellar. But in general, we use the barrels just to give the wine a chance to work with oxygen during the aging period in cellar and not really to take over any flavor from the oak.
And they're steamed before to get out some of that oak flavor, right? Do you use the young barrels? And I remember, I can't remember somebody telling me, I think it was in Mosel, that they, for their lowest tier wines, they use new barrels. Because if there was any flavor imparted, it would go into that.
Yeah, well, we definitely sense that in the first and maybe second year, there is a little bit of an influence of that fresher oak. That's why in the first 2 years, we don't put the highest quality in those barrels, and we try to do a lot of fermentation happening. So that means we use it very early during harvest, and then probably after the first wine that ended up in the barrel is fermented, we put that to another barrel and go with another juice into it to have a second fermentation happening in one season in the barrels, just to kind of use it off a little bit, so that after 1 or 2 years, it's really, really neutral in taste. So of course we pay attention to them at the beginning and probably change the wine more often that is lying in the barrel to not have a too high influence. But this is really something you get a feeling about it. And after year 2, you don't really have to worry about it at all. And you can put the best stuff in those barrels.
Okay, let's talk about your best stuff, because you have some amazing vineyards, Berg Schlossberg, Roseneck, Rutland. Can you talk about these unique sites? We visited the ones in Rudesheim, and they are so different. I mean, you can look at them and see that they are so different. What makes each of these so different?
Yeah, well, in Rudesheim, we have the 3 single vineyards we're working at, and they are all in the very, very steep parts of it. So Rudesheim itself, it's quite unique in Rheingau because it combines the flatter, more rolling hillsides that are dominating Rheingau between Wiesbaden and Rüdesheim, so the eastern 20 kilometers of the region. And then in Rüdesheim, the middle Rhine Valley is kind of like closing up, and the landscape gets really dramatic and steep, and it's much more about this like slaty character in the wines. And this is where our single vineyards in Rüdesheim are. And we have 3 of them because they are so unique, each of them. And they are next to each other. So literally, it's sometimes only a little road that is dividing them. But if you really go into like the core of the site, they have a very, very unique story, all of them. So Gotland is the closest one to the village. And that's where the hills are just starting to steepen up and really become a slope, and it's all close to the water. So you have, in general, the warmest climate there because the difference in temperature change during day and night temperature is not so high. The river keeps it on a bit more stable level, and you have also the mirror effect that the river offers, so that the sun is reflected there, and the soil is slate dominated. So the soil is also very, very warm. So Gotland is probably the site that warms up the most. And Roseneck is then above that. So Roseneck is in the upper levels of the slope. So it kind of carries the opposite conditions. So it has the cooler nights. Soil-wise, there's more quartzite influence, which is the lighter colored rock. And this gathers the cooler parts of the climate and still being in general, very warm spots. Mm-hmm. And then Schlossberg kind of follows those 2 and brings it all together. It's the site that plays the whole slope. So it starts at a level of 90 meters where the river is, and it ends up just underneath the forest where we are on an altitude level of almost 300 meters. Jeez. So there's 200 meters of height difference from the very bottom ones to the top ones. And this just makes it very, very complete every year. And we have quartzite and slate. So we have a mixture of these 2 components. And Schlossberg kind of brings it all to one spot. But at the end, in the wines, Schlossberg is always the one that probably needs the longest time to bring it all together, but also has the longest future ahead of it.
Oh, yeah.
So all these characters, of course, influence the wines and, just bring them to a very personal.
They are all so unique, and it's weird that how close they are, you know?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, but there's a reason for them.
How did you guys acquire? This was your grandfather acquired these, is that correct? The vineyards.
Yeah, well, he started, yes. For example, in Berg Schlossberg, we have one of our biggest plots, which is 1 hectare. And this hectare was actually for a long time what we had land-wise in the Schlossberg area. But the whole Rüdesheimer Berg, the whole slope, was kind of rearranged in structure from smaller terraces to bigger terraces to just make the work a little bit easier there. And that happened in the late 60s and 70s. And in that period, we got, as like a gathering of all the small spots that we had in the Schlossberg area, we got that hectare in one piece out of. And today we are working actually on 3.5 hectares in Berg Schlossberg. So whenever there was a chance to gather to just take over a beautiful piece of land, we couldn't resist, kind of. And
didn't you tell me that at some point that Rheingau, the wine growers were trying to figure out how to make it so that you could own more, you could swap plots so that they were together? Wasn't that something I sort of vaguely remember?
Well, that happens, that kind of like naturally happens when this Flurbereinigung, this restructuring of an area, like a segment of an area happens. And this is always like due to very bad roads and like in need of changes, or probably we're part of it with our Roundtal vineyards in the east corner of the region at the moment, where there is just a need of renewing some of the like roads there is, and also the water drainage system doesn't work very well. So due to those reasons, there might be some new arrangements happening. But in general, at the end, we are farmers, and everybody really believes in like the best quality of that particular piece of land where you're working since ever. So it's not so easy to swap a vineyard just because it might be closer to yours.
Also, I remember, and this problem that you stated. The vineyards are on top of each other. You own one row and your neighbor owns another one. You want to do organic viticulture, but your neighbor might not. And then you can't really do it because all their stuff is floating onto your vineyard, right?
Yeah. Well, we still do it. And we hope to convince others around us to do it as well one day. But yes, of course, you have to face the fact that you will in some plots where your area is really tiny, you will not like be really organic if your neighbor is doing like the opposite that you do. But that's not a reason not to do it. But yeah, the structure of the region in some parts is really, really small, segmented. Yeah.
I think this is part of the question about the generational. I mentioned this at the beginning. You're really the face of the new generation of German winemakers, Rheingau winemakers. And there is a bit of, is there a tension between the older generation and the new? Is it respect? Is it difficult sometimes to understand that they are saying, we've done it this way forever, we're going to continue to do it this way?
I think you find everything.
Yeah.
But this is something that Rheingau is also quite special, because you really, for being such a small region, you find everything. You find the big houses, the super traditional classic houses, the kind of like old chateaus, Schloss Johannisberg, Schloss Vollrath. They are not they're not private owned. So there's a big company. For example, Schloss Johannisberg is owned by a bank. So they have wine. They have a completely different way of thinking about wine or their wineries as
investments
companies and not
their businesses. Yes.
Yeah. So there are very different structures in the region. And when it's about the smaller producers and younger generation that is interested or very ambitious to take over, I think there is a much higher understanding for changes and for like the passion of the young generation behind it. But when it comes to the big players, the goal is something different. It's not about living a passion or probably making a family living out of it. It's more about figures or prestige or something else. So I think you will find everything, and also in future you will always find everything. It will never be the most homogeneous region.
Which is so funny because it's so small.
Yeah, it is so small, but that makes Rheingau also special, that you have everything there, that you can, like from Frankfurt, which is one of the most important business cities in Germany. You can just drive half an hour and you can be at a small winery in the backyard and enjoy the wines. And then you can also visit one of the most beautiful chateaus with the longest wine tradition or monasteries in Germany, and you have it right next to each other. And
yeah,
you can just
it's true.
Experience it.
One other question on the vineyards, because you mentioned Rheingau. That's far away from your places in Rüdesheim. And
in Rheingau dimensions, yes.
Yes. So I would love for you to both talk about the style of the wine, but also some of the logistic challenges that you have in owning land that's not contiguous. Because don't you struggle with some of the logistics of, okay, I've got to be here in Rüdesheim, but then I've got to also watch these grapes. It's far enough away, so it's a little bit of a problem, right?
Yeah, well, it's in addition, I would say. It's 20 kilometers away, which in Rheingau dimensions is far away. It's literally at the other end of the region, which is, if you see it, I don't know, in Australian conditions, just around the corner. So it's still reachable. But of course, if you go 20 kilometers by tractor, it takes you some time. But those 20 kilometers are not the only difference. It's also that Rauental has a completely different microclimate. We are a little bit away from the river. It's a southeast facing slope where we have our vineyards. So the whole development is also different, which is quite important for us. So in kind of like a classic year, we always start picking in Rüdesheim. We're done with more or less half of the picking when we start going to Rauental, because we're so delayed in the whole vegetation process over there, which makes us at the end actually able to pick Riesling during harvest for about 4 weeks. And we still have the feeling that we're in very good timing with all the different plots that we work in, because they develop so diverse. So it is a beautiful addition actually to that warm character that we have from our Rüdesheim vineyards to the bit cooler climate part in the Rauental area. So it is something that, of course, is a challenge because you don't see the weather there on a daily basis, and you're not in the vineyards as we are in Rüdesheim. But that also means that whenever you are there, you focus much more and you really keep an eye on it in a bit different way. And that's something that can also bring a positive effect to it.
It's also just another intellectual challenge, which I think you like a lot.
Yeah, well, I've never really put it in that phrase, but we should maybe, and that everybody is motivated.
Well, you're such a smart person. I think that you would be, it's just another thing for you to think about, which I think you need to keep lively. So why are your wines so different from the rest of Rheingau's wines? Why are they're so elegant, they're ageable. What are you looking for that maybe is slightly different? And also, can you talk about why, which I love these wines, and I think everybody should make a little bit, but you make Orleans and I'm not going to say this right. Hunix?
Orléans and Heinisch, you mean?
Heinisch.
Yeah, no, we do. Well, these two varieties are tiny amounts that we have in our vineyards of, but it's nice because it teaches you a little bit about the old days. So Orléans is a grape variety that was planted in our region about 350 years ago, quite a lot, in different ways, in mixed plantings, a lot actually, but also in single varietal plantings, especially in Rüdesheim and the steepest part of Rüdesheim, because it's a grape variety that needs a lot of sun to develop real ripeness. We also planted it in Berg Schlossberg, in our most extreme site.
Oh, wow.
And my father, when he started that, he really wanted to just understand a little bit about our history and probably also why things have moved on to Riesling as a major variety. So he was really fascinated by the idea of just learning what happened here in the old days. And Heinisch is an experiment, or it has experimental character in a similar way, but in a different direction. Heinisch is one of the parents of Riesling. Riesling is a crossing of Heinisch and Traminer. And Traminer is somehow familiar to everybody, or it's at least something that you can learn about. So you kind of have an idea of the flavor and of the taste of it. But Heinisch is something also nobody really knows how it tastes and what it gives to a wine. And that's why in the Bergrotland, in that other steep slope in Rüdesheim, we have planted a really tiny terrace with that Heinisch grape, just to really learn what our most important variety today has as ancestors, and how the flavor has reached that stage where we are now. And well, as we've experienced so far with Heinisch, it is very interesting to taste, but it's horrible to grow because the grape is so sensitive, and it really doesn't make sense to grow more of it because you will lose at least half of it every year. So it's very smart using it as a partner of a crossing, because it really brings the flavor components into a grape that is able to survive on a regular base.
Yeah, Riesling is hardier.
Yes, so those two little experiments are more like living museum vineyards where we just get a little bit.
They taste delicious.
Yeah, we try to always. It has always a goal to make a nice wine. We're not doing experiments to just learn. The goal is always to make a nice wine out of an experiment. So we try, but it's a tiny amount. And we're very, very happy that we have so much Riesling around. We really love the purity of that grape, and that it just offers so much without being opulent and overloaded, and that it has the capacity to really show where it comes from, and that you can really reflect your home in a grape. And this is our goal with Riesling. We try to not overload the wines. We try to reduce our influence to really just the level of what is needed, but then treat the grapes and the wines in a laid back way to be able to let the origin speak out.
That shows in your wines. I think your wines are so elegant because they're speaking of the vineyard instead of speaking of you. You can taste the differences so distinctly. Do you think that Riesling around the world is getting the respect that it deserves?
Yeah, well, I think yes. I think in many ways, yes. It will never be the grape variety that everybody loves, because therefore it is way too edgy, and it is the biggest challenge for Riesling is probably that it tastes so good in so many different ways.
Yes,
and that you don't really can build only one profile of a Riesling wine, because it can do so many things. You can have it in a beautiful sweet style. You can have it in a fantastic dry aged young style. So it's really hard to create a Riesling that will be all over and that everybody kind of understands what Riesling is. That will never happen. But wherever people really pay attention to the variety and are curious about it and dig into the world of Riesling, I think there are already many Riesling lovers around the world. And yeah, there's of course space for more, and we will find them. But I think it will never be the Pinot Gris or the Chardonnay that is in an easy way, easy to understand. Riesling needs some attention, and that's good.
Yes, I think so too. And I think there is no grape that is more versatile. And there is a new generation that has shaken off some of the bad stuff from the 70s and 80s and are thinking about the grape as it should be thought of, which is this multifaceted, very diverse grape. Yeah. So what is next for Georg Breuer, for Theresa Breuer? And what's the future for you? You're going to keep on keeping on?
Well, there's Vintage 19 coming, so this is the next step. No,
You're bracing for it.
Yeah, well, we, as you already said, it seems like we're looking for challenges and keep ourselves entertained. We've been taking over some vineyards in the other corner of Rheingau, where we have not been until yet. So we've taken over around 6 hectares in Lorch, which is 15 kilometers west of us, or northwest of us. So we're spreading out. It's not that we wanted to get bigger, but there was an offer of just those big, beautiful vineyards. And 30 years after my father took over the vineyards in Rauenthal, it was probably time to do a next step. So next to the satellite part Rauenthal, we will from this year on have some satellite vineyards and wines from Lorch. So this will be definitely super exciting. We have no clue how to handle it in our cellar yet, but we will find a way. There was always.
Is that going to be Pinot Noir?
No.
Or is it going to be?
It's mainly
no,
Riesling.
It's Riesling.
Yes, it's mainly Riesling. It's all steep slopes. It's all slate and quartzite dominated. It's mainly southwest facing terroir, so it really adds something to the vineyards we have so far in our hands. So it is something extra. We will see.
That's great.
Yeah. I hope. No, but we're all looking forward.
Well, you'll figure it out.
Yes. No. We really fans of those sites, and it will be great.
It's a totally different profile. That's where the river starts to turn.
Yes,
right?
correct. So it's like serious, middle Rhine character, and it's something else. So this is happening this year first, and we will get to know hopefully those sites better in the next coming years, and we will grow there in knowledge. Hopefully, we're quite sure it's a good addition to what we do already. And every vintage brings a new challenge, and we just try to get smarter and better with every year. And we're not at the end. There's a bit more to do for us.
Much more to do. Many more generations to come of the Breuer family doing wine. And still keeping with tradition and the unrelenting focus on quality. And that is why I love you. But you do understand that you are one of the smarter people in the wine industry. And listen to you. You're like, well, we need another challenge. This is why your wines are so delicious. You're always looking for the next thing. And I think you're amazing. I am obviously a huge fan of Theresa. Georg Breuer wines are available all over the world. They are widely distributed. They go from a basic regional Rheingau level, but remember, regional is small. Start out there if that's what you can find, but seek out these single vineyards and age them, hold them. They will reward you incredibly, because that is more than anything else. I would say that the Georg Breuer wines are better after a couple of years because of this beautiful subtlety, and the evolution of them is just divine. So, Theresa, thank you so much for being on the show. I am sorry it took me 2 years. I was just trying to give birth to this book, which is finally done. But I will come to see you again. You keep doing what you're doing. You're awesome, and challenge everybody else to be like you. You're we need more people like you.
We go for it.
Okay, with that, this has been another episode of Wine for Normal People. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.